Really go inside and find the things that turn you on. Find the things that gets you excited, and then pursue those things with that same energy.
A movement is underway of people abandoning the emotional, physical, and financial expenses of city living and crafting their own purpose, livelihoods, and joy in the rural reaches. The Urban Exodus podcast shares the wisdom, wit, and stories of those who decided to embark on the road less traveled to pursue their own interpretation of the good life. Small business owners, change makers, artists, farmers, and more, working towards building a better future for themselves and their fellow citizens. This podcast is for country dreamers, rural folk, and urban dwellers alike who want to feel more connected to the natural world and the purpose and choices in their lives. I'm Melissa Hessler. Welcome to the Urban Exodus. I'm excited to invite you to my conversation with Bing Turner, MPH. Food justice is at the core of Bing and his wife Myisha Turner's entrepreneurial efforts. After a long career in public health, it was impossible to ignore the gross inequities when it came to having access to fresh, healthy food. Bing and Myisha decided to join forces and do something about it. So first off, I just wanted to welcome you to the show, Bing Turner, MPH. I'm really inspired by your life's work and what you have been doing for all of the communities that you've been involved in. So it's a real honor to have you on the show. I'd love for you to share a little bit of your personal backstory, where you grew up, how you met your partner, etc.
Thank you for inviting me to your program. There's a small city in Los Angeles County, Compton, California. Born and raised in that community, lived there up until the age of 15, 16 years old, and later moved to this other area in Los Angeles County. It was Pomona. The neighborhood was called Phillips Ranch, and it had sort of like this idealistic, we had a green belt and walking trails, which was very different from the community in which I grew up in, which was Compton. Coincidentally, I met my wife around that time. We met in junior high school. So I've been knowing my wife, and who's also my business partner. We've been knowing each other since we were 13, 14 years. So we dated one semester in high school. So we're looking at like 1990, 91, around then. We dated. We broke up, but it was never like a weird breakup. Everything was sort of like pleasant. So we kind of left on good terms. I don't remember why we broke up, but I know years had went by and literally ran. It's a crazy story, but nevertheless, we reconnected years after I had moved back to California from being away at school. And it's kind of interesting too. And I tell people this all the time, while all the crack and the gangs and all the crazy stuff that you hear in the media about Compton that was going on in the 80s, that stuff actually was happening. But then there's the other narrative and the other side of what was happening. A lot of the community members that are from Compton are from the South. They're from Louisiana. My grandparents moved from Shreveport and New Orleans, back in the 30s and the 40s. They all migrated to Compton. My parents are from Compton. But a lot of the practices, growing their own food, bartering with their neighbors, all of that stuff was happening. So, at the same time where you hear all the ugly side of what was happening in these neighborhoods, you had solid Black communities that were sort of, growing their own food, raising chickens. I grew up in a backyard with a chicken coop, never had chickens, but it was there, and it was a relic of what was, it's the same house that my grandfather had lived in. We all have fourth of an acre backyard. So a lot of people think of, Los Angeles as this sort of very dense populated area with no land. But I mean, literally in Compton, the majority of the community members had these huge backyards and they literally grew their own crops. So it's just really interesting. It's a full circle moment for me in the work that I'm doing now, 30, 40 years later.
And I mean, it sounds like how a rural community functions, right? Like growing your own food, bartering with your neighbors. It sounds idyllic.
Very, very, very idyllic, very similar. We had opened a farmer's market in this community called Norco, California. Norco and Compton could not be on paper two diametrically opposed, communities. But when I spoke in front of the city council, I had to remind them, about, all the things that Compton and Norco had in common. And, there's a huge horse culture that takes place in Compton. Well, Norco is known as Horsetown, USA. And also, coincidentally, it's the same way in Cotton Valley. I know we'll get into my work in Cotton Valley later, but a lot of the same things that take place in these rural communities, you find remnants of it, you find, pieces of these things that are happening in surprisingly urban areas.
So you have worked in public health for many years, and your wife was an entrepreneur. I'd love to hear the founder story of Heritage Education Group and Heritage Farmers Market and what roles you each fill in your professional lives, because you've been in each other's lives for so many years and now you run businesses together.
So the Heritage Education Group, entity started in 2004. It was originally founded by my brother and I, Donovan Turner, who's also an educator. And we created it in 2004. We were both in classroom teachers. And what we wanted to do was provide access to education skills. So we realized that a lot of, African-American children did not, do well in testing. So we wanted to give the communities, community students in the community, access to like testing skills. We bolstered their English proficiency. And we did this sort of like as a summer camp. In addition to the camp aspect of it, we also provided them with experiences that they typically were not getting in the urban setting. So we did fencing, we did yoga, we did like nutrition classes. We talked about like obesity, we talked about exercise. So that was between basically 2004, and we were very active between 2004 until 2009. So after which I was involved with public health, and coincidentally, a lot of people don't know this, that Myisha was in law enforcement years before she became an entrepreneur. So when we actually got back together, she had this law enforcement background and I had this education and public health background. We had a situation in 2009 where our son became really sick. He was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. And so with that, we began to pivot in the type of work that we were doing with Heritage Education Group. The education component was sort of shepherded by my brother, so he sort of moved on with that. But Myisha and I, through our personal story, we said, hey, let's look at ways to provide not necessarily educational access, but like food access and food education. So that's how we started Heritage Farmers Market. So that actually started later in 2009, 2010. What we ended up doing was basically using my background in public health and in education, knowing about issues surrounding, food access and food justice. And with her background, she's an entrepreneur, I think, by heart. I mean, even when she was with the sheriff department, she was, always doing events and coordinating events. But she's very creative, number one. But then also she's really good at like systems and uniformity and having sort of like things in order. And so we sort of, over the years have sort of used our raw skills as, a really solid organizer with her, and my background with, community work and doing like food access work. And we sort of have just sort of mended these two things to sort of, push whatever initiatives or whatever programs that we have wanted to create or currently are creating.
That's amazing. The focus for Heritage Farmers Market has always been community-based education, public health, and environmental ecology. What changes have you noticed in the communities that you serve since starting the nonprofit?
I think directly and indirectly, I think the timing we've always just been excited about the timing of the work that we're doing. So in the beginning, when we first started this work, the Obama administration had the Let's Move campaign, and you had a very progressive posture that the government took in encouraging people to move more, to eat more healthier, to be more conscious of, what people are putting in their bodies. We sort of have been either like on the wave or a little bit ahead of the wave. And so we have seen impacts where it's not really advocated at the government level, but community members are still interested in these issues. And so we've just seen our market's participation has increased. And there's also a greater demand in surrounding communities saying that we want these types of things in our neighborhoods too. And one of the things that truly fascinates us is that, we've had a couple markets, and this one particular community the city is called Rancho Cucamonga. Rancho Cucamonga is sort of associated with like affluence, and it's sort of like the crown jewel city in the inland valley region of Southern California. But even within the, beautiful, Rancho Cucamonga community, you have pockets and you have places within the neighborhood where people are still food insecure. And you really begin to see this, of course, because of COVID, people, were just like one check, two checks away from, soup kitchens and people having access to just food, not necessarily fresh food, but just food, period. But these are things that were happening in these communities. One of the markets that we have is located in the mountain communities. And so a lot of people associate mountain communities in California with vacation homes and vacation rentals. But again, the demand for fresh vegetables, access to affordable food is an issue. So we've had markets up there, and you begin to really see, there's a lot of beautiful stuff in doing this work, but then you also see I don't want to say like the underbelly, because it's not that dark, but you see some of the issues, the serious issues, the life impacting issues that people have when doing this work.
I grew up in California. You're absolutely right. It's the pockets. There's so much affluence in California, but if you just look up to the hills, you aren't seeing all the people that are actually working in those communities. And now people that are working in those communities are just getting like pushed further and further out. So food justice has been a cornerstone of your life's work. What drives you to keep going through all of the inevitable roadblocks that are constantly put in your way on these projects?
Oh my goodness. Roadblocks. So there's this old saying, and I truly believe this. One of the guiding principles is always running in the back of my head is, and I'm so inarticulate when it comes to remembering these like cool phrases, but it's something like the goal in front of you. Well, the end goal basically has to be greater than the obstacles that presents itself. And so, if you're for us creating these models or experiences or these opportunities for ourselves, we have to be realistic in knowing what our bandwidth is as far as, first and foremost, financially, is this going to, are we going to lose our shirt? Will we still be able to maintain to pay our bills? We think through all that stuff, but at the end of the day, the goal at the end has to be greater. And I think because of the work that we're doing and we understand the seriousness and the impact in how what we do can literally change lives. It can change health outcomes. We realize that it's worth it all. It's worth the dealing with the duplicitous nature of some politicians in some of these communities. It's worth dealing with knowing that people will take your kindness and your you're wanting to help, they'll take it for granted and they'll try to, manipulate situations or try to see what they can get out of it. We understand that going in, but we're just solid in what we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And the good thing about us being, married is that we're kind of like always working. So even our pillow talk is sometimes it's a work meeting. Road trips, they're typically filled with just sharing information and, trying to see how we can be better, more responsive, how we can just continue to do good work. Their obstacles are there. They're there.
This season of the Urban Exodus podcast is brought to you by Jake.art. Bring the beauty of the outdoors in. A new online art shop brought to you by Urban Exodus. Search our collection of affordable, high-quality fine art prints and illustrations by color or theme to find just the right work for your home or office. Or commission us to do a custom illustration or photograph of a loved one. Visit jake.art, that's JAKE.ART, or click the shop button on urbanexodus.com. I also work with my husband, and you're absolutely right. It's all the time. You don't even know that you're doing it. It's just how you communicate. And I don't think there are very many couples that can function in that capacity. I think it's really amazing what you guys are doing together and how you stay focused. Let's talk about Bernice's community market, which is nearing completion in Cotton Valley, Louisiana. This is your first community grocery store project. Why did you choose this community to build your first grocery store?
It was sort of two parallel things that was happening at the same time. So selfishly, my mother-in-law lives in that town. So after, subsequent visits to the community, Myisha saw the need, not just for her mother, but also for, the hundreds of people that are in that community. She saw the need. So it was part, making sure that our mother-in-law had access to really good stuff. But then also there was truly a need. I mean, it was truly a need. And the area was, even though it's thousands of miles away from California, getting in and out of the neighborhood was, believe it or not, financially feasible more so than trying to do a business model like this in Southern California.
I mean, that makes complete sense to me.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, you need tons and tons of money.
Like 5 to 10 times probably the budget, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what we paid for the building could possibly buy us probably a year worth of lease in California. I mean, we bought the building and the land for what we would pay for at least for a little under a year in California. So just that in and of itself, it gave us an incentive to do work in the community in Cotton Valley.
Bernice's community market is really like the start. You basically want to create a template. You want to have something that you can replicate in other areas. How can people support the mission of Bernice's community market? Because this is a grassroots effort. This is you guys just kind of trying to make this happen. What are ways that people can help support this particular market and your mission for the future?
So for those who listen who are located in Southern California, for us personally, whenever you come to one of our farmers markets, so we're located in Chino Hills, Rancho Cucamonga, Crestline. Yeah, so those are the cities that we're currently in right now. The proceeds that when you support the farmers markets, you're directly supporting the work that we do out here in Cotton Valley. And you're supporting the local economy, but then also you're doing something a little bigger, which is you're providing, food access for the work that we're doing in Cotton Valley. And then if you want to work directly with us in Cotton Valley, I say two things. The first thing is our GoFundMe is up. So just do GoFundMe Cotton Valley. Just do a quick Google search and it comes right up.
I'll have it on the website.
Yes, please. Thank you. We're asking, we really need donations to kind of get this thing going. And the reason why there's an assumption that we're able to access all of this funding that's coming down the pipe. And I think eventually we will qualify, but because the way this business is a new business, typically what the government is asking for is like 2 years of taxes for your business. And we haven't been operating, we haven't been around. We haven't even opened our doors. And so the direct support that you guys give us, whether it's $5, whether it's $5,000, whether it's $100, whether it's $25, we literally take that money and either we're purchasing paint, we're purchasing, tools.
And you're doing a lot of this work yourself and going back and forth.
And we're totally bootstrapping this thing and we're going back and forth to kind of work things out. So that's how people can support. And then also, if people have relationships with other businesses, small businesses who have products, whether it's dishwashing soap or whether it's a package, candy bar, we like to support as many small entrepreneurs as possible, preferably as local as possible. But then also, if you're located in, Poughkeepsie, New York, and you create a really cool soap, let us know. We want to carry those types of things in our store. We want to carry national brands because we want people to get the things that they're used to, but then we also want to introduce community members to things they may not have necessarily thought about.
That's wonderful. So I know that building this market has really required you to weave yourself into the fabric of this small community. What do you love most about Cotton Valley, and would you ever consider moving there in the future?
Yes, I love Cotton Valley. Yes, I would consider moving there in the very near future. We're currently we're right outside Cotton Valley. The main city is Shreveport, but we fully intend on being physically in Cotton Valley. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is that we did a focus group prior to actually committing ourselves to this project. And, focus group is sort of like, from a public health practitioner's perspective, it's sort of like it's like our way of doing an assessment, a needs assessment of the community. And it's a very good way to sort of like glean information straight from community members' mouths. And what we did, we had a very active and participatory experience at our focus group where we had community members literally write some of the stuff that they wanted in the community. We gave them prompts up on the board, but they answered with pen, and we talked about it. Then months later, after we did the focus group, we reported back to the community what our findings were. And it wasn't the most scientific way of doing things. However, it created and gave us a lot of credibility as to finding out what the needs are from the community, and the people that participated can speak to the work that we wanted to do and how it's reflected back in what's going to be presented in the market. So all of the stuff that we're going to have in the market are things that the community said that they wanted. That's one good way of, if you wanted to immerse or engage yourself in a community in which you want to, do a project in, I highly recommend doing a focus group. Another thing that I would highly encourage people to do, and it sounds very simple, but trust me, it's not done a lot. You cannot be afraid to talk to people. You cannot be afraid to just sort of, engage folks at the very basic level, whether it's just a simple hello or, how was your day? And just having conversations with people at gas stations and asking questions. You get a lot of good feedback, but then also you're starting to develop relationships in the community. That's very important. But then, there's also the other side of doing work. I think in small towns, word gets around really quick. People, people, for better or for worse, they gossip. And so you just really have to be wise. It's cool to be transparent, but then also be wise about the type of information you want people to know about you. And of course, people can always, depending on who you are too, if you've done this work before, people can always do like Google searches to kind of, get the 411 on you. But for the most part, it's communicating with people, making yourself accessible, being visible. People initially, when I first started, that's where people possibly saw me jogging around the neighborhood. I would walk. I would park the car and walk. Just like, simple things like that. I know everyone doesn't have that luxury of doing it, so I'm aware of that. I think it's also a privilege to be able to do a lot of this work that we're doing. So I don't take it for granted that, I'm truly blessed that I'm able to have the business and a relationship with my wife and my business partner, that I'm able to, come and go back home when I need to and come back into town. So that's also, that goes without, I wanted to mention that as well.
And that's such good advice, everything that you've given, both on starting a business in a small community and just, building community. What advice would you give to people who want to take the initiative and maybe build a community grocery store in their own area?
What I'm finding out about a lot of these small communities, even in the larger communities, right now, there's tons of real estate. The inventory for real estate is out there. People have, because of COVID, things were a little funky before COVID, so it's even worse now. But finding out what type of real estate is out there.
Yeah, commercial real estate is actually accessible, much more accessible now than it has ever been before COVID.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's like, of course, the savior in me wants, want to go to, because we just got back from visiting a member of the rural chamber. We just got to finish visiting their community, and it looks just like Cotton Valley. It's just abandoned buildings. And so I would encourage people to look at that, but then also finding out what type of needs are in the community, because not all grocery stores, it's not one size fits all. So you literally have to know what type of things the community members needs, know what their needs are. We realize that our community, they don't have high incomes. So you have to be mindful of not bringing in, high value or high expensive, meats, people won't buy them, number one, but then also you'll be left with this inventory on your hands. You have to know what the cuisine is of the community. So we're in North Louisiana. We know that there's a certain type of peas that people like, the community. Purple hull peas is like a big thing. I know to carry purple hull peas. Will purple hull peas work in Los Angeles and Rancho Cucamonga? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not. But, it works in these communities, and you kind of have to get out your own way. There are some things that I don't eat just from, for personal reasons, but do I not carry it? No, I'm going to carry it because it's what the community wants and what they ask for. But then also there's some things that I do eat that the community doesn't eat that I may want to, introduce the community to. And it could be just a healthier option of something that they're probably already aware of, but maybe it's prepared differently or, served differently. So those are some of the things that I would encourage those who are looking to open up a business, a small grocery store in a local community, is just finding out what type of real estate is available, but then also finding out truly what the needs are of the community before doing it.
That's great advice. As a master of public health, I'd love to get your thoughts on what fundamental things you think need to change in our food system.
Whenever I'm looking at public health issues, I'm looking at implications from like a government perspective, from a corporation perspective, and then also from a community perspective. Those are sort of like, it's like a go-to thing. So from a government perspective, I think the way that our public health is really big on incentives. So whenever you're doing either like focus groups or you're doing surveys or anything, you want to always incentivize the process. You're asking people to take time out their day or, time out their moments, to sort of respond to things. one of the incentives that we have at one of our farmers markets in Southern California is that if you are a community member who live in this particular section of the neighborhood, if you attend a workshop on healthy eating and preparing food, we give you $35 a month to spend at the farmers market. And that is only regulated to like healthy items. So you have to, anything from the farm section, you can use your $35, vouchers to use at the farmers market. On a government level, I'm saying that we need to start incentivizing the good stuff. The subsidy model is so twisted because we're constantly subsidizing things that health experts say that we need to eat less of. So we're subsidizing, processed meat. We're subsidizing, corn that's typically converted to, soybeans. And so why not subsidize like the good stuff that they're saying that, that is nutritionally dense, like, leafy greens.
And the farming practices that add more nutrients to the food that they're creating.
It's so antiquated. So I think that there needs to, on the government level, from a public health perspective, on a government level, those are some things that can be done, and it can be done relatively easy and quick. From a business level, it would be prudent and very smart for businesses that are manufacturing food it's starting to happen in some areas, but the labeling of products that we get. We're getting labels and they're getting better, but labels I think are not as clear and not as transparent as they can be.
Yeah. There are a lot of ingredients left off. Like they don't even list ingredients in all bread that there are.
That's in the bread. Yeah, they're not as transparent as they should be. So I think that should happen on the corporation level. And it's happening slowly but surely, but I want to encourage manufacturers to be very explicit in that. And then also from a community level, there's always, you want people to, kind of cook their own food more, prepare their own food. But then also people really need to, learn how to grow things again. That is something that's relatively easy. It takes very little time. It just takes some attention and some creativity. You can grow things in your home, like tomatoes can grow inside their house. Fresh tomatoes, you can have fresh tomatoes, year-round in some communities. Having a small garden in the backyard, having a community garden in your neighborhood. There's so many different cool things you can do to sort of develop your relationship with food better. Those are the three things I think from a public health perspective that we can do to sort of kind of help, mitigate some of the public health issues that we have surrounding food and food access. We just have to have the will, especially we have to have the will, but then also, people have to really develop agency and demand things. And so that's the other part of it too. There's the responsibility of us too, as just individual citizens, to sort of being our own advocates for our own health. There's a community that we live in Southern California. It's called Claremont. And when I first moved to Claremont, we sort of like noticed one of the things that was just the strangest thing was we noticed that there wasn't any drive-through restaurants in Claremont. And while I was in grad school, I sort of wanted to know more about my town. So I became they had a health policy fellow. And I literally wanted to be the health policy fellow for my city so I can like literally be nosy and dig into what makes this community kind of, looked upon as like a healthy city. And so, number one, it did not have any drive-throughs. But the reason why it did not have any drive-throughs is because community members said that they didn't want any drive-through restaurants located in the city. And it was directly connected to community members wanting to make sure that there was fresh, healthy options within the neighborhoods. And not until recently, and recently I mean like 2011, 2012, they just allowed drive-throughs in their neighborhood. However, that was because of banks. There were banks that wanted to be in the community, that wanted to have drive-through banks. And so, that was the only, I guess, opening or opportunity for drive-throughs to be part of the community, is because they wanted banks, because the language is very specific, no drive-throughs, but they did it for the banking, for banks, for your local bank. So community members, they yield more power than I think that they realize. And so if people sort of just, know that you have a voice in this, it's very important to use it.
My community that I grew up in Northern California, Arcata, it's a little hippie town. We had a cap on corporations. So there were no fast food restaurants. And I think there were only like 10 corporations or something allowed in the town. And so there was like one revolving fast food chain that had got in there first. And so it would just change hands to different fast food chains as they went through.
But it was this one particular building.
Yeah, one building. Yep. Mm-hmm. And people do have so much power. You're absolutely right, on a local level, to really make changes. Even adding sidewalks to communities so that people can spend more time walking and riding their bikes.
Yeah, that's all a part of health and wellness. So like in public health, there's this thing called the built environment. And you'll be surprised, how many things are physically built in communities that prevents you from walking. So like Cotton Valley, I mean, we think it's kind of cute and genteel when you have these kind of neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks, and it's just like there's a street, and then you just kind of pull up in this long driveway, and it's kind of cool. But then also, what are like the long-term effects of that? You don't have people that, are walking. And if they are walking, especially children and, the elderly, is it safe? So those are sort of like, things to consider. That's spot on with the sidewalk thing, because a lot of people don't think about that. But you're right.
There are lots of ways to make communities better if you can get involved in local government or even just attend town meetings. Yeah. How do you structure your days to balance work life and home life?
I typically try to get most of the administrative, paper, email, communication stuff out of the way early in the morning. Oddly, I'm constantly working in 2 different time zones. So I'm kind of aware of, who's awake back home in California before I make phone calls and all that types of things. So it's literally trying to get as much paperwork done in the morning. And then in the afternoon, typically at about noon or so, I'm usually at the store. So we're still building out stuff. We're still putting together shelving and, racks, and, we're even starting to get some of the inventory that comes in. So it's morning administrative stuff, midday at the store. And, they got these casinos out here in Louisiana. So it's not the healthiest thing, but it's fun to sort of just go listen to music, unwind. $10. We have a change drawer, and the change drawer fills up, and we take that change drawer, we convert it into $20, $30, and we have at it. And that's sort of just some kind of recreation. I try to get out and walk as much as possible. And we also give ourselves, since, and I'm sure you can relate to this, we kind of give ourselves opportunities to do things alone, since we spend so much time together.
Yeah.
for just our own sanity and our own peace.
It's very important.
It's very important. Like, Myisha is notoriously known for going away and, spending time either at a shopping center, or she loves bookstores. I do not infringe on that time that she's there. That's her time. And then, I'd like to drive. And so I take long drives. I take long walks. There's so many things that I'm discovering in the state, in the community. So I'm usually either driving around or walking.
This episode is brought to you by the workshops at How Hill Farm, a new photography and creative workshop series brought to you by Urban Exodus. Workshops are hosted online, and at our farm headquarters in Midcoast, Maine. The workshops at How Hill Farm offer learning experiences that encourage you to experiment with new techniques, hone your creative vision, and advance your professional opportunities. Check out How Hill Farm's full lineup of online and in-person offerings by visiting the workshops page on urbanexodus.com. Stay up to date on courses and happenings on the farm by following at How Hill Farm, that's HOWEHILLFARM on Instagram. So 2020 and 2021, quite honestly, have been really, really hard on so many levels. What has this really difficult time taught you, and how are you carrying those lessons into your work and processes for 2021?
Oh man, that's a really good question. It's wild on so many different levels. So one of the things that we have sort of recognized and sort of have taken to heart is the importance of a family, and not just, because we have a son, so there's us three, but then, making sure that lines of communication with other family members are very sort of open, and you're just kind of like checking in on one another. That's very important. And, us not being able to see our parents as much as we wanted to during this time period, it's just making sure that you're connected to your family. That's very important. And then also how that translates into our business is, checking on your neighbors, checking on the community in which you're serving. So, the store sits in a neighborhood, so there's homes to the right, there's homes to the left. I'm checking on those guys for number one, because just out of humanity, just kind of making sure everyone's okay. But then also, I sort of need their eyes. I need them to sort of like look after me, look after my building, look after my space when I'm not there. So, it's not necessarily a transactional relationship, but, so there's this humane thing in checking in with your neighbors just to check in. But then also long term, how that translates into the business is also, you just need people to sort of like kind of look out for you. That's really important to me, because I can't really get to the business. Sometimes it's a commute to kind of get there. So I've had issues where don't know how, but like the back door is open. Nothing's taken out of the building, but the back door was open. So I had the neighbor actually called me. He couldn't get in contact with me, so he called, another neighbor who knew how to get in contact with me. So, those are things that I sort of like set up in the beginning. Hey, my name is Bing. We're new to the neighborhood. Here's my phone number. And so, those are the types of things that I would encourage people to do, especially during this sort of awkward time that we're in right now.
Yeah. What advice do you have for people who feel really inspired by the work that you are doing, and maybe like COVID, the pandemic? I think a lot of people are reevaluating what they're doing in their lives, whether what they're doing has purpose and serves others. What's your advice to them on ways that they can get started in doing work to make it better for people?
I have this mentor, and he's still my mentor to this day, Dr. Reed Von Tuxen. I'll say his name. So when I met Dr. Tuxen, I was in high school, and he was the president of a university. The high school was connected. It was King Drew Medical Magnet. It's connected to Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science, located in Los Angeles. And so I met him. And so when I graduated from high school, went to college, I wanted to be a school teacher. And so one of the things that he said to me that I have used in different aspects, he said, when you become a teacher, I want you to reflect on all of the things that as a learner excited you, all the things that like turned you on about the learning process, and use that as energy to sort of become a teacher, and how you how you teach and how you educate and how you inspire others. And I say for people who have been either, questioning their role either in corporate America, or they just want to change, or they want to live a life with more intention and just more purpose, is to really go inside and find the things that turn you on, find the things that gets you excited, and then pursue those things with that same energy. So, underneath all the public health work that I do, there's this underlying thing that I have in me that I just want to expose people to so many different cool things. I've always been like that. I've always just been like, either not necessarily like new, expensive, shiny things, but new paradigms of thinking, or, hey, I read this cool book, or, hey, I saw this cool program. Have you guys watched this show on whatever, on Netflix? And I just love sharing stuff with people. And so I think that sort of fuels the work that we do, either in public health or food access, or a lot of the community stuff is just me exposing and sharing stuff with others. And I encourage people that whatever it is that they're doing, just take it with that same amount of energy. You can't go wrong with that, because it's authentic. It's coming from an authentic, real place, and people sense that. I think over time, like, this dude is like on fire about this stuff.
Yeah, you mean it. You have that passion behind it. Yeah, it isn't self-serving too. I think that people feel that in people. It's like, I do this because I have to.
Yeah, and I truly want to. And I it's it comes from a different place. There's so many other things I could be doing. We can be doing so many other things. Myisha and I, we laugh at this all the time. Like, we would kind of like look at each other. I'm sure you and your husband have done this, and kind of like shaking your head, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, sometimes.
Right. Sometimes you say, like, what are we doing? And then, you have those moments, and then you're like, okay, buckle up, buttercup. Let's get back on and keep it pushing.
What legacy do you want to leave for your son and for future generations?
Oh, man, that's a really good question.
I'm throwing all the hard balls at the end.
Oh, my goodness. Legacy, I want to leave for my son and I have some cool nieces and nephews, and I want to leave a legacy of I am living a life of giving and sharing. That's important to me. My father, me and my father, we've had a good relationship. We have a good relationship. And, he's going through a transitioning process right now where his health is in decline. And I'm reflecting a lot on him and what type of messages in his legacy. And he has sort of instilled in his children doing things with honor, but then also having a certain grace to the work that you're doing, and having a certain level of excellence. And so that's something that I would like to continue in sharing with my son and my nieces and nephews. And then also for the community at large, for the greater community, but specifically to the African community, to the African American community. It's important for us to continue the legacy of doing things in excellence, and doing things with grace, and doing things, with honor. I love that about, our people. And it's not just a lesson for, Black folks, but it's a lesson for everyone. And so, yeah, that's like, and then also there's the, of course, there's the financial impact of what we're doing. I want to be able to, live a life that I'm a business person. I'm not this huge, big corporation. And so I want to be able to financially leave my family with something that they can be proud of, whether it's a physical representation of what we're doing. There's these really cool community-centered markets throughout, the South, or throughout, rural America, that is part of our legacy. I would love to do something like that. I think that stuff is really cool.
That would be a great legacy. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, Bing, and I'm just really inspired by the work that you and Myisha are doing. And I encourage everybody who listens to this episode to immediately go to Bernice's community market and make a contribution towards building that out and towards the future of what you're going to create. So thank you so much for speaking with me today. I know you're a very busy guy.
No, I appreciate you. And Myisha sends her regards. This is one thing that she does not do. She doesn't do video or podcast stuff. Everyone has their lane, and she's like, you got it, brother.
That's my husband. He's like, get me away from any having to talk, but I will support you in all the other ways.
Absolutely. So, but and kudos to you guys. I was nosy and kind of snooped, and I love the kind of work that you guys are doing especially with the workshops. I can't wait for them to come back on.
Thank you.
That's some really cool stuff that you guys are doing out there as well.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Bing Turner, MPH. He is truly someone with passion and purpose, someone who has dedicated his life to making sure every person has access to fresh and local food. I encourage you to contribute to the Turner's Capital campaign to get Bernice's community market up and running. You can find a link to their GoFundMe page and pictures of the build-out on our blog, urbanexodus.com. I want to take a moment to dedicate this episode to Bing's father, Bing Delano Turner, who passed away while this interview was being recorded. Bing's legacy of doing good work and inspiring others to do the same is ever apparent in his son's work. May you rest in peace, Bing Delano Turner. Thank you for all that you did during your time on this earth. Hi, friends. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Urban Exodus podcast. Urban Exodus is a labor of love, and it's only made possible by your generous support. Maybe you just discovered Urban Exodus, or maybe you followed the project for a long time. Either way, please consider supporting my efforts so I can keep this going. The first and easiest way is to click the support button at the top of urbanexodus.com and pledge any amount you like. Second, sponsor an episode of the podcast as a business or individual and get a 20-second ad spot in an upcoming episode. Just click the podcast link on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Third, you can sign up for an in-person or online workshop with me or one of the incredible creative professionals through our workshops at How Hill Farm. Click the workshops page on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Fourth, you can buy something from Jake.art, our new Urban Exodus online shop. A fine art print or wall art for your home or office. A custom illustration or portrait of your family or loved one. There are so many cool things. Just click the shop page to peruse what's available. Lastly, you can hire me to photograph your business or family, or take one of my online or destination workshops. Click the collaborations page on urbanexodus.com to learn more. Another really excellent way to support is to recommend Urban Exodus to your friends and relations. Also by giving a 5-star ratings on iTunes to beat the algorithm and so that we can be more easily searchable. Your continued support will keep this passion project running. I want anyone who feels unfulfilled by career or circumstance to know that they have options and alternatives. All of the work that I do through this project is to encourage people to believe in themselves and to work towards a better future for their community and the planet. Thank you for helping me continue to do this work. You can find Urban Exodus on Instagram and Facebook at The Urban Exodus. To read more in-depth features on folks who ditched the city and went country, visit urbanexodus.com. Until next time, I'm Alyssa Hessler, and this is The Urban Exodus.